Welcome back to Skillcast. I have a friend here with me, Shawn Bogedain. He is the chief operator at a plant that's making methanol, also the project coordinator as well. And he has made a truck that makes over 150 decibels. That's true. That's like putting your face in front of a jet turbine engine or something like that, pretty much.
Pretty loud. Yeah.
All right, so you're here today to help us understand a little bit about your story, which is something that I heard a little bit about in this past fall. I met you at a class that we were doing to get a boiler's license, and your experience in the skilled trades intrigued me. It was far more and wide ranging than the boiler world alone, and I thought that it would be a great idea to have you come on here and tell us a little bit about that. So thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
And let's start by going backwards. We like to see a little bit of like what led us to the point of where we are. So I want to start in high school. What was high school like for you? Did you like learning? And what were you kind of leaning towards as your future career?
I was always like semi-decent in high school, right? But just I'd rather be outside. I'd rather be doing something else than high school, you know? I think as a lot of kids can relate to that. The thing that intrigued me about high school was the vocational. Like all the vocational classes, welding, automotive, work, wood shop, all that kind of stuff.
Just the idea that they were all there together was the one that got you into it more than the others, a project that you're more excited about than another?
Like automotive.
Yeah.
Like automotive, like cars and, finding the inner workings on how they work. It's,
When did you own your first car?
like 12.
I knew you were gonna say something crazy, dude.
Yeah.
What was it?
90 Ford Thunderbird, believe it or not.
Man.
Yeah.
You're the kind of person I wonder if you still have it somewhere.
No, I wish I did.
That means you'll find it. You'll find it one day.
I wish I did. That was the first car I ever put a subwoofer in, before I even had my license.
That's the only thing that matters at 14, dude.
Right.
How loud can I get this thumping?
Yeah.
All right, so automotive got you into that. Was that because of just your natural bent, your friend group, your family? Was there like what was your circle like?
So like a lot of my friends were semi into cars, but they didn't go into like the great detail, I think like growing up on a farm where we were wrenching on, rototillers and lawnmowers and tractors and all that kind of stuff. Like I saw that like, man, this is pretty essential that these things run all the time and we're dependent on it, in the whole world, like a person goes out and presses the key and starts the car. Their whole world revolves around that moment. Because if not, your days, your weeks are all, thrown off because of that one thing. You know what I mean?
What were you farming?
Man, what didn't we have on the farm? We had an apple orchard. We had a grape vineyard. We had big strawberry patch. We harvested sweet corn. That was our main like substances that we did. Like vineyard, making anywhere from grape juice to maybe a few ounces of wine here and there, for personal consumption. I couldn't even drink, but that was the family members thing, mixing the yeast and the sugar and fermenting it, and getting it to turn into wine to have at Thanksgiving dinner or New Year's Eve or whatever the case may be.
That
So
sounds awesome. Making it from your own backyard.
yeah.
We bought the sacks of juice once. Had done that a couple times. Made our wine at a wedding, but making it from the soil.
Oh yeah, it's a huge process, like making sure the plants are good, the harvest, the grinding, the pressing, you name it.
Yeah. So let's talk about your like school influence to go into the trades / go into college. Did you feel any kind of pressure in either way or encouragement? Doesn't have to be a negative at all. Just wanna hear
So
your
like I
story.
always had like this quest for knowledge, right? So I like graduated with vocational honors in the automotive program. I had family members that, was in the automotive world, like owning their own business or being mechanics or whatever. But I was also like kind of always intrigued about like building houses, you're building something from nothing, right? Like you're starting with 2x4s and how it all comes together, and the amount of teamwork that it takes to actually make that accomplished, it's just like, man, you see It's never just one person that, builds a house. There's always teamwork involved. And I guess that's where I always, lend to is like, what can you work on as a team?
What did you I mean, how did you even get connected to that? Like, I see the Tyvek stuff up, you know what I mean, as I drive, but doesn't mean I know anything about the teamwork that's involved. How'd you get
So
connected?
my dad used to build houses way before I was born. And then my brother actually did it as a career, owned his own business. So when I was like 17, hadn't even barely turned 18 yet. And I was like, well, I think I'm gonna go build houses with my brother. So then I was like, okay. And I didn't know anything, right? Like spacing, I was just kind of like, hey, we're gonna set these studs in a specific pattern.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden then it makes a wall, you know what I mean? So like I was very green, but
He didn't pay you very well, did he?
I mean, it wasn't like I can make a career out of it, let me tell you. So, but the
What's his name?
knowledge,
Jared? Jared, you better give your brother a raise, dude. That's
yeah. I mean, he is one of the smartest people I know, as far as what he can accomplish,
Is
and
he still involved in that today?
yeah, believe it or not, he's still doing it, and me and him worked on a project. We built a deck behind my house, this year. Just his knowledge is just like so, so vast, and little tricks and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's like almost building a house is almost like an art form.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How it all comes together. You got this blank canvas, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you can do all these little tricks and tips and make it look good and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we had an addition put on our house last year, and we had this crew come in, and there was a pair that always worked together, and there was other crews in there, but these guys were doing like the doors and all that kind of stuff, and some of the siding as well. And just quick example of what I've experienced is we exposed the old siding on a house. It's nearly 200 years old, and exposed wood from the Civil War era. We needed to punch a hole through that wall from the existing house into the addition. And so they made a doorway, and to the art form, they were on their way home from working at our house when they were in the middle of that project. And in that open project, they were waiting on pieces and parts. Everything takes longer. It was maybe a week or two, and somewhere in that week or two, they passed by a barn that was being torn down that was like the same shade, and they picked out wood and got the square nails, because that's how everything else was punched in there, to just make it look perfect, because we had run out of that kind of
Yeah.
wood, obviously. And that was like, obviously, now as I walk from my existing house into my addition, it just feels like the people cared. And it just makes a tremendous amount of difference, I think, because now the rest of this house as well, like,
Yep.
has been cared for. So and I think, and they were super excited too, you know what I mean? They got all jazzed up because they're like, look at this wood we found, look at this thing we did, and they were not upset to be there.
And it withstanded the test of time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful. So about how long were you doing houses?
So I did that for, about a year, right, with him. The unfortunate part is it was in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So I'm like this young kid, like tourist season was great, like got to meet people, and then like all of a sudden it's like non-tourist season and you're just up there,
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, like I'm this kid, and I'm sitting here like, man, there's like no one my age, you know what I mean? Like the whole school of like Paradise maybe had 60 kids in it from K through 12. The amount of knowledge, and then getting to work with my brother, I'll never say that was a bad experience. That was, awesome, but I was like, man, I sure would like to bring it back to somewhat civilization, you know what I mean? And like, you got friends that are 400 plus miles away and all that kind of stuff.
What did your friends do that were taking them so far?
So like I went and started building houses out of high school, while most of the friends were like, we're going to this college, or we're starting this. And I was like, nah, that's not, hadn't even thought about it, like what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. And I was like, building houses seemed pretty cool.
Yeah.
So like
And
everyone,
it is. I mean,
it is.
yeah.
I did that, and I was like, man, I should probably get back to civilization.
Okay, so
I moved back.
So just purely because of that, or because you found some way that also brought you?
Yeah, so like, my cousin, he was pretty instrumental. He was like, man, you're so dang smart, with cars and all that stuff. Like, why don't you just keep going with that and see where that takes you? So I had applied to like UTI, took their aptitude test, tested like I think it was like top 100 for that application or whatever. But I was going to have to live in Chicago. I was going to have to live in Chicago to go to UTI and everything. And it was very expensive. I didn't grow up around money or anything like that, and that was going to be a huge cost. And that was going to be on me. So I started like looking at like, man, how am I going to recoup this money once I pay this out, it's like, and still live life,
Yeah. Do you remember how much it was? Just to
Oh
put
yeah,
a number
like
to it.
for like, not including like this was back, long time ago. But like it was like $30,000, and it was $30,000 now, not including dorm, food, you're still paying car insurance if you had cars, and it was like, man, that's really tough to swallow. It's like you're gonna carry that loan for a long time. It's not a guarantee that you're gonna get a job.
Right.
You know
Or
what
a
I
good
mean?
paying one.
Or a good paying one.
Yeah.
You may have to start at the bottom.
Yeah.
You got the schooling, but that doesn't mean you have the knowledge for what, big companies want. And that was doing like repair, kind of like your dad, like working in a shop and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, I just don't see the overall value in it.
Yeah. I think a lot of people experience that too, where the assumption is, whether it be in the trades or whether it be through a university of some kind or majoring in something, it's not always connected to what employers are looking for.
That's correct.
And so you got to build that, and also be a little bit choosy. So like for you, you saw that. What pathway did you take then?
So then like, I was like, well, I guess I should start off at like the community college level, start taking like, the basics, right? But I still loved the automotive stuff. So I was like, I'm going to take and try and get like maybe go down to a degree, get a degree in like applied science, but with automotive backing. I started working towards that, Believe it or not, while I was doing that, I wasn't full time or nothing. I was taking classes here, classes there when the money was available to do so. Still living as a kid, making dumb mistakes, that I think most kids do.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I got in the labor's union and doing demolition, and that was like, holy crap, this is great money.
Unpack that a little bit. What do you mean?
I got in with a company through a friend, 21st Century Salvage, that's out of Michigan. They tore down buildings. They would tear down or, completely demo the inside of a building. Gotcha. Or, if it had to do a demo, they were in it,
Yeah.
And
why did you like that so much? Why do you think it was
good? So like it's almost like washing a car, right? That like instantaneous like gratification, right? You can do a job for 3 weeks and this building was like completely normal, right? Like, and then all of a sudden you walk in like 3 weeks later after 100 guys are in there and it's just bare.
Yeah.
You have that instantaneous gratification. And for the most part, if, like as long as everything was marked out, it's like, well, you can't knock this wall down wrong. You know what I mean? And the camaraderie that was there was awesome. The friendship and just the harassing of each other on the job site and all that kind of stuff. Like that was, it was a tough job. Like absolutely tough job. Like the things that we had to do, and you had like your main tools was like an axe and a crowbar, and it was rough, but man, it taught me a lot. You know what I mean? Like hard labor is out there. Right. So, even though that this is like pretty simple, you would think that it still is highly dangerous, and you're learning skills on that, doing demo and doing that you don't think that you're learning, but you're learning, watching each other's back and working to get that common goal. Like it's still like you'd think like, oh, we're just going to demo the inside. And it's like, well, is there natural gas live? Is the electricity still live? So you still have to be safe, because if not, someone's going to get killed,
Yeah, absolutely.
So even though like you look from 1,000 feet, there's still lots of skills to be learned. Coordinating machinery and semis and all that kind of stuff. Like it's a big deal, So I I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was pretty crazy, And plus I got to go to all these different historical sites or banks or testing laboratories where we were doing demo and I got to learn and see actually the landscape of, the state I lived in. Buildings that you would never walk into, we were demoing to rebuild, Then it got into like lead and asbestos abatement, and that's, you know, a very dangerous job, So like removing asbestos, removing lead, like that's a big deal, So there's certifications and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh man,
Another challenge.
another challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, as you go to travel, and you're asking questions as you go around and you're trying to give me another skill for this abatement stuff, it's a good point that it's not just natural. Experience is not gained just naturally.
Correct.
You have to pay attention. You have to be inquisitive. You have to desire to learn. I have met many, many people who had the opportunity to learn, and we've all had this experience, certainly, and we've chosen not to, right?
Yeah.
But there are people that lead their lives that way.
Yeah.
That I'm next to the thing that would question the status quo, and that's painful. I don't want to do that. And I think if you can get behind it, like in a way that you live your life and the way you describe it right now, as it's like a blessing,
Absolutely.
to be able to stretch yourself, learn new things, see new things. And I think that leads us back to your kind of timeline here, because you ended up finishing school and ending where?
Yeah. So I decided I was like, okay, I'm going to finish this. Right. I'm going to see it through. And I got my engineering, did like an applied science, right, with an automotive background. And then I ended up getting a job at Ford Motor Company doing at the Research and Innovation Center in Dearborn. And then I was tasked to work with the chemical engineering department. At the Research and Innovation Center, there's, engines in there in the Dyno laboratory where I was stationed that, are 10, 15 years. There's engines in there that are like engines that you can see through, right? And they can measure flame fronts across pistons. They can see, it's all made of quartz and they only fire every, 30 revolutions. And you can see how when you inject the air, put the air in, inject the fuel and actually ignite it with the spark plug, the flame front travels across the piston and everything. And they can see that, right? Innovation, that was their main thing with the task of innovation. There's always roadblocks, right? You can have an engine that, runs really, really well and makes tons of power, but it doesn't meet emissions. So that's what side I was on, is like I was what we would call the fun police. So all these.
Wait, was that like a self-termed term?
Yeah, like that's what it's like
Someone else called.
yeah, like in the industry, like we're the ones that are like putting the catalyst on, so and we have to pull back the reins so that way this thing can meet emission standards, you know what I mean? Still mindful of fuel economy, and basic component engine structure to, have integrity and still made emissions.
So is this like with new and existing projects only, or would this also be tasked, like, for example, we came out with a car 3 years ago with certain standards and then the EPA changes its standards. Do we have to go and figure out a way to
Yeah, so
correct that?
that's the big thing, is like the EPA, the government is always wanting to improve standards, right? As far as like carbon emissions, right?
Yeah.
And NOx emissions and hydrocarbon emissions and everything like that, right? So we want the cars to be clean, right? So, they'll put in a standard, and usually how it goes is like, hey, we're putting in this standard and we're going to phase it in, right? So, by year 3, year 5, year 10, like this is where we want the emission standards to be, which then drives on the backside the innovation to get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
While still maintaining fuel economy, and all that kind of stuff, So we are working on projects like lean NOx traps and stuff that, is great in theory, but then you have to be able to prove it, in the dyno lab. So we were working on stuff, 5 to 10 years out, and working on like FTP, bag cycles and all that kind of stuff, trying to meet the EPA. And then we were also benchmarking other companies, great companies like Audi and Volkswagen and, GM and all that kind of stuff, benchmarking those companies as well to say, hey, we need to be at least here or if not better, and how do we get there?
So let's talk about you for a second in that role, because I would think coming out of college, like, okay, I'm uncreative in the way that I think of a mechanic, even though my dad was one. Like, you put the car on the lift and then the tire comes off. That's the job. And you're describing things, of course, that are much beyond that. Is that what you anticipated? Was something that was more chemical in design?
No, not at all. Like I was
Did you lead
anticipating.
to it? Not to cut you off, but did you lead to it because of the job opportunity or because of a
Yeah,
desire?
I think it was a little bit of both, right? My dad had worked at Ford, and I was like, man, I want to continue that tradition. This may not be the end job that I have forever. I'm fresh out of college. I don't have like a major engineering degree or nothing like that, but I have the will to learn, and I'm willing to take on new things to try and learn that, right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, I was like, you know what? This is like foot in the door. Right. I'm going to be working on stuff that I have never seen. Basic principles there. It's an engine, right? But much more advanced, right? And like, man, I'm going to be working with some of the smartest people around, people that have PhDs and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, man, if you ask the right questions, they're gonna give you that wealth of information, and you're just going to continue to learn, and I was like, okay, my vision was like, oh, I'm gonna work for Ford Racing and, I'm gonna be on a NASCAR track or something like that. And here I'm in a dyno lab, working on like controlling emissions. But believe it or not, like it was so much to learn, the control systems of the dyno lab, the emission systems for testing, for testing in controls of controlling the engine coolant temperature, controlling the oil temperature, controlling the actual ambient, test cell temperature, working with HMIs, PLCs, stuff like that, stuff that I hadn't seen, Allen Bradleys and stuff like that, that was like, this is a lot. Like, even though it's not something that I would have dreamed about, but it was amazing, right? Because it was so in depth. You know what I
Something
mean?
to sink your teeth into for sure.
Absolutely.
Did you see recently that the CEO of Ford put out an article? I just read it.
Where they're short a bunch of people.
Yeah, they're offering, like, they're assuming many of those people will make $120,000 a year, is what he's on record saying.
Yeah.
I wonder if you saw that.
Yeah,
and made a comment.
there's definitely a shortage.
Yeah.
100%, as high schools have budget cuts, that, what's the first to go? Oh, vocational, right? So you start with like, where are you getting these people from?
Yeah.
Right. And if it's not in their culture at home, their home culture, and it's not, being offered to learn that culture, well, then how do you try and develop that in an industry, right? Even here in America, you know what I mean? And as cars become more and more technical, right, with, CAN bus systems and, electrical demands on them, then where do you get these skilled people? Right. So that's the question.
I hope that your story inspires people. That's
I
what
hope
I'm
so
hoping.
too,
Yeah.
because like, man, it's amazing. You know what I mean? Like, like I tell people, like you just go out, press the start button, thing fires up. You're like, do you know how much stuff goes on to make that happen?
I do not. No. No, but I'm happy when it starts.
Right. So like there's a ton, you fire up this CAN bus network and it starts talking to everything, and the feedback, and then to meet, and that the thing's got to meet an emission standard and all that kind of stuff,
So lead us to the next part of your story. You're still going to be dealing with cars, I think, but how did that happen?
So I got kind of recruited to go to a company called Matthey Testing.
Okay.
So that's one step farther. They help develop the catalyst. They own the mines and they help develop the catalyst for these companies, GM, Ford, Cummins, Detroit Diesel, all that kind of stuff, right? And as diesel emissions kept getting more and more strict, they were like, man, we need to really ramp up on our testing, right? Because Cummins is looking for, a supplier to help meet their demands, with DOC, DPF, SCR, ASC, with the NOx control, diesel particulate control, and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of was like not really looking for a job. I was looking for something, just always looking. And I actually got a phone call, and they were like, hey, we're interested in having you come down and help. We're trying to win this Cummins project, and would like you to help run, diesels.
Yeah.
And, you already have experience with the chemical engineering department with their catalyst and all that kind of stuff. And it was funny because those are intermingled. So I actually, like going to Johnson Matthey testing, I saw some of the engineers that I had worked with at Ford because they were getting catalyst from Johnson Matthey testing. So Johnson Matthey testing actually makes the catalyst. They make the substrates, and then they also help with the precious metals. They're a precious metals company.
What was your position there?
So like I started as like, pretty much like a dyno operator.
Okay.
Right.
What is that?
So engineers come up with a test plan, right, to see the performance of the after treatment system, cold starts, hot starts, FTP, drive cycles, all that kind of stuff. As ours, we would, make sure the emission, like Hariba and all that kind of stuff, all the emissions, the test cell, everything was in order, right? Put the parts on, all that kind of stuff. Make sure that test cell and that engine was ready to go, right? And then we would run the test. We'd collect the data, the drive cycle, the emissions data, all that kind of stuff. And then the engineer would then review it, right? And then send it off to the customer, which would be, Detroit Diesel, Cummins, whatever project we worked with.
How often are you actually running a test?
Sometimes it's nonstop. At our facility, we ran, when we were trying to win that Cummins project, man, we were doing like it was like that facility never shut down. There was 3 shifts of dyno technicians, engineers on call all the time. It ran nonstop, to try and get this, emission compliancy under control.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah. I mean, we worked a lot, right? And that was great, right? Because
What's a lot? Help people understand what's a lot.
Like
Because if it's a lot for you, that's probably
it
a
was
lot.
like 12. Like I think like my first year there, like I think I worked like almost 7 or 8 months straight without a day off. So like my daughter actually went to, my daughter was young, and she told the school counselor like, yeah, my dad's gone, and like, and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, my wife at the time was like, what are you talking about? Like, no, dad's still there. It was because I was doing like an afternoon shift for so long, it was like, oh crap, I should probably pull this back, but we would do like, 12 on, 2 off, 12 on, 2 off. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was great. It was a lot, and it was hot. Test cells would be hot middle of the summer, but it was good. Like there was good camaraderie there. And, there was a lot of very smart and talented people that I worked with. And the knowledge that, I got from that job was amazing, and it went on I went from like, operating the test cells to then actually building the test cells for the next, like, so when we would do a test cell upgrade, we would upgrade the controls, down to the height of the desk, we would be putting all new monitors, control system, Hariba systems, and going from like 7200Ds to Mexa 1s. And I was actually on that project. So I got to help like, design where to place heat exchangers, where to put valves, where should we put booms, all that kind of stuff to help speed up the process of changing engines. Because as the demand goes up, right, you need to maybe be able to run this engine for, maybe a week and then put a different engine in there. Right. So the demand of constantly being able to replace these engines, goes up. You have to innovate to make things quicker. Couplers, instead of hard mounting an engine, maybe putting them on a pallet with wheels and all that kind of stuff. Getting that test cell to be able to turn over and be more efficient.
Yeah.
So then I went into that zone of it.
Yeah. Like a real clear problem that you went to go and
That's
fix.
correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So you did that for how long?
Almost 10 years.
Why not continue with it? What led you to the next thing?
So like as the test cells got built, we became more efficient. it was just kind of like, man, this is great, right? We were able to be more effective. I was a lead trainer for all new technicians to come on, to train them, to be familiar, right? Because that was the thing. We were short there too. We just couldn't find people, right, that had ran dyno cells or in the industry of after treatment, right? So we had to take on people that, didn't have that skill set, which wasn't a problem. We just had to make sure that there was a training program in place. So then once the test cells were being built, then we say, someone moved up or moved on, right? Then we would bring somebody in, and then we would do a 6 to 8 week training course where we would train them on calibrating benches, how the operating system looks and all that kind of stuff. So there was a shortage of qualified people in that industry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I believe it.
So,
And, it sounds like you guys made the training detailed, but being in the business that I'm in, we often see the lack of that X job we need people for. There's nobody that knows this skill. We can't hire for it. And then we just start hiring people for it, assuming that they're going to assimilate by shadowing. But we never take time to create resources and benchmarks to actually train that person, thoroughly. And then we're frustrated. Why are things not
yeah,
working well? Right?
why aren't we meeting our timelines and all that kind
Yeah,
of stuff,
course,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's an age-old story. So what took you away from there?
So like I was like lead trainer. I trained all the new people. We were building test cells and it was good. It was just like, what's out there? You know what I mean? What's out there to um to go, to a different level or something, you know what I mean? To do something different. You know what I mean? Like by the time I was like on my almost 10th year, I've been in an engine cell, right? Running dynos and all that kind of stuff for almost 15 years. So I was like, man, I don't know if this is the end goal either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was like, man, there's got to be something out there, something different, something that I can learn. The goal is always be successful at it, correct? With the goal being in mind is like, okay, is there a skill out there or is there a place out there that will take on a guy like me, like we take on at Johnson Matthey, right?
Right.
So like we took on a guy that didn't have a whole lot of knowledge, lots of people actually,
Yeah.
and we trained them, right? So I'm like, what if there's a industry out there that I could go to that they would do the same to me?
Sure.
So that's kind of where it landed me here at the facility that I'm at now.
And who got you into that facility?
Actually, I kind of got recruited as well. So some guys that I had known and worked at my last job actually came on board like a couple months early, and they're like, hey, we're looking for people to be operators at this new plant that's just getting built, and commissioning and all that kind of stuff. And they had actually like, hey, call this guy, and
What did that mean to you at that time?
pretty like rewarding, I guess. Like, you know what I mean? Like, wow, it's the next thing you know, I'm getting like the phone call from the vice president of the company being like, hey, heard you might want to come down and work at a plant, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'll try, I'll interview for it, You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, right? So it's like, well, I'll do it, I'll come down, at least have the conversation. I think it's worth it, and
What happened in that conversation that made you decide you wanted to do it?
we were sitting in a room, and Brandon O'Rear is the engineer, one of the best mentors I think I could ever have. Sitting in there, and he was like, do you know like a control scheme? And I was like, yeah, we have control schemes at Johnson Matthey. He's like, can you draw one? And I was like, man, this put me on the spot, So I'm like, yeah. So I drew a cooling tower control scheme, right? And he was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. It's like someone with that kind of knowledge. And I was like, it's just on a much larger scale, right? So some of the stuff that you learn along your way can come across, like can cross talk, I guess, or cross reference to another job, right? So, which I thought that was pretty cool, you know what I mean? That like, okay, yeah, they have a cooling tower too, so at least I have a foot on the ground, like starting to know, which led me into being like, yeah, absolutely, I want to take this opportunity.
You had a unique experience, is that they were still building it.
Yes.
Which I think is so, if you stay in a plant like that after, it's fully erected now and all the commissioning has been done and you got to be involved in it, like, that plant better, far better than anyone who's going to come 5 years from now.
Especially when it goes into its honeymoon stage.
Yeah.
right? So like, you build a new plant and you get all the bugs worked out of
Oh,
it,
shake it
control
all
scheme,
out.
shake it all out, right? And like you really get into like, man, this thing's humming along and it's doing great. You're in the honeymoon stage, right? So the honeymoon stage is like the first 5 to 7 years, all your pumps are new, valves are new. You don't get that like on the job training, right? Because it's in its honeymoon stage, right?
Yeah.
So stuff doesn't start going wrong, right? So bringing this particular side of the plant up or shutting this particular side of the plant down right as you're commissioning it because you need to change a valve or you need to change piping structure or anything like that. You don't get those reps, right? You don't get it because it's just humming along in its honeymoon stage.
I love your story. Just seeing the arc of it right now as you're talking and reflecting on the idea that beginning of this conversation, you're a high school kid.
Yep.
You had life experiences in high school, of course. You grew up on the farm, but like everybody starts with the same baseline in the sense of I don't know what this is. And someone must teach me or I must teach myself, and certainly others have more advantages. Some have more advantages than others, but to kind of watch that arc of like I'm working with houses, I'm working with cars, now I'm working where I am today. It's exceptional just to see that the hard work that you put in, the consistency you've put in, the attitude that you constantly have, that you're not kind of like drained out by the idea that I got to switch again. Actually, you're energized by I get to see a new opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's like a great attitude to have, right? There's two main concepts, right, that you can put in your mind, right? It's either A, I don't know this, right? And it's going to be overly complicated, right? So I don't want to know. Or you have an open mind to it and you're like, I think I can learn this.
Yeah.
We're not talking like quantum physics, right? Like, like I think I can break this down into simple. And I think there is amazing people out there in any industry that are willing to teach you. If you keep an open mind and a positive attitude.
Now, where you are, do you feel like it affords you a certain amount of happiness?
Absolutely. One, like, knowledge is power, right? There's not a person out there that I think will disagree, right? When there's a problem and, you're like, man, we solved it, we avoided disaster or whatever the case may be, right? So there's that, right? So then you're like, man, I hang my hat on that. That's one of the values that you can't get, right?
Absolutely.
Without the one being the problem present and two
Yeah.
being able to be part of the solution.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it takes a bit of courage, like you've given it too, to
Yeah.
put yourself out there. But I am going to talk about the money just real quick. Are you paying the bills?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
You have a little bit of left over, you
Yes.
think?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I can't.
Would you be bold enough to say if you're making over 100,000 consistently?
Oh, yes, consistently.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's helpful to hear even that end of it too, because I didn't anticipate that when I went into the skilled trades. I didn't anticipate making more money than I anticipated making in white collar.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there was, and yeah, it's long hours sometimes,
Sure.
and sometimes you're going to miss something, right, in life. At the same time, you can also afford a better quality of life for your kids, for, your family, all that kind of stuff, you're not being so much, I would say, stuck if you're open to it, right?
Yeah.
And it opens doors that you wouldn't be able to do sometimes.
Here at Skill Stigma, we like giving good news about good jobs in unexpected places. And I think your story highlights that. If you can think about where you are now or something that you've done in the past, anything that's connected to the skilled trades, do you feel like you can give someone out there the good news about a good job?
Well, I mean, the good news is that there is still jobs right out there, right? And there is still like really great companies out there that are looking for someone that may not just have the skill set, but knowing that they're short, are willing to take on someone that, has a positive attitude, have that willingness to learn. So that's like the great news is, right? That you don't necessarily have to have the skill set to turn a plan around or be on a commissioning project or something like that. But there's companies out there that are looking for someone that, like myself, right, that didn't necessarily have the skill set, but had the willingness to learn and willingness to ask questions and actually do the job, right? And that can open up, right? It can change your life, there's a shortage, right? So with that being said, that's an opportunity in itself. If you're not in a surplus, right, of workers, right? So you say, okay, I'd love to have more on my team. Well, man, is there anybody out there? It's like, well, we have a great team right now. We could bring on someone that maybe not have the skill set, but we could teach that to them.
Yep. Yeah, even someone's boldness to say they want that, I think speaks volumes to companies right now. So last question, what's next for you?
I don't know.
What do you desire, you know?
Well, like I have some of the greatest people that I've ever worked with, you know, at my current place, right?
Yeah.
And have been great mentors. Like some of the things that they have taught me, you just can't learn in a classroom. So with that being said, like, you know, I'm going to keep wanting to do that, right? Keep wanting to meet amazing people that have a specific knowledge or here, whatever. So, you know, maybe traveling, maybe going to different plants, different, you know, help with commissioning or, you know, problem solving, right? So, and to help be on those teams to help make things better, be effective and efficient, you know, all that kind of stuff. That's awesome. You know what I mean? The day-to-day stuff is great, but when there's a problem, man, and you can sit in a room with all these talented people and be a part of it, there is a reward to that. Yeah.
I hope you continue to do the kind of work you've been, touching people's lives and bringing them up to a next level. I know they've done that for you, but you should know you've done that for many people too. So keep it up, and thank you for having this conversation, dude.
Yeah, no problem.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching our video. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe us on our channels. And if you want to continue the conversation to find out if there's a skilled trade that's built for your future career, be sure to pick up our book called Skill Stigma at skillstigma.com.